Welcome to Strider Tree Gear. Today we're talking about lanyards. There's a lot of options out there, so I'm hoping to clear up a little bit of confusion, break down some of the pros and cons with a few of these different options, and hopefully leave you a little bit more informed. Here we go. So when I first started climbing, I was climbing a lot of pine trees, doing relatively simple removals, and I started out with a steel core lanyard, or wire core lanyard, as some people call them. Now, wire core, steel core, they have some key benefits over the more common arborist lanyards. Hopefully that's not making too much noise. But I'm gonna break this one down for you. This is I'm not sure who makes this. A lot of them are very similar. Rope Logic, I believe, has one steel core lanyard that is marginally better than all the other ones on the market because the swaged connection isn't just the wire in it, it actually has the cover included with the swage, so it gives it a little bit of redundancy. Over time, I've had these steel core lanyards, I've had the covers pull back on them well before the actual wire is worn out. And that has a couple of downsides, but primarily the thing you gotta look out for with these guys is the fraying and the bending that can happen right here at the splicing point. When they fail, that's typically where they fail. They don't often, and they allow for some extra strength for things like handsaws especially. No reasonable person is going to cut through this lanyard with a handsaw, with your silky. So there's a little bit of safety factor there, whereas most of the rope lanyards, one good swipe and the silky will go right through it. This one in particular has got a nice heavy snap, which is critical for one of these because it makes it way easier to flick around the tree. This is my long one. I still use this one from time to time, especially if I'm going to be rigging down or otherwise working in a big pine tree where it's pretty straight up and down. I'm gonna spend a lot of time with it. I'm gonna be using a big saw. Obviously a big saw or even a small gas-powered trimming saw will cut through this eventually, but usually, sometimes you'll get a warning. Sometimes you'll feel that catch, or with the handsaw, there's this great Instagram video where a guy hits it 3 times with his still trimming saw, and it's not until the 3rd time does it actually end up cutting through, whereas the rope lanyard just cuts through immediately. So it is cut resistant, it's not cut proof. Here's an example of where it probably got nicked with a saw at some point. Didn't even get through the cover, but it probably should be retired. But anyways, this is the wire core. Pros, it's strong. It's a little bit easy to flip around a tree because it's got a little bit of rigidity to it. It's gotten some nice weight and a little bit of cut resistance. The cons, the downsides are primarily around the functionality of it. When you're up at an oak tree or other hardwood tree where you've got a lot of little spars and you're trying to connect at crazy angles, it can be a little bit difficult to manipulate this in the tree as opposed to a rope with a carabiner or a weight on the end. But a little bit safer, has its advantages. I don't use this often anymore. All right, so next here I've got I just threw this one together real quick, but this is a basic rope lanyard. We use a double fisherman's termination knot on a swivel beener or a swivel snap. This is a triple locking snap, so it's actually safe to use as a life support. Now these ISC snaps have a known flaw where some of them will actually stick open, so I'm not necessarily recommending this one exactly, but I like having snaps over carabiners. Obviously a carabiner at the termination would work just as well. They're just a little bit slower to get open than these nice easy snaps, which you just grab and they're super, super slick. I've also got this sliding prusik with an eye on it for a variety of options that it gives you a variety of work positioning options to help things out. I'll have a little more detailed video later about some of those. But this is a feature of the Teufelberger CE lanyard, which I think it's called the Hipstar Flex now, which is a great lanyard. It's very similar to this setup right here. It's got a pulley, much like this, for tending. So this will be the other end. This is a one direction pulley, so you can tend your slack in that direction, but it holds here. The Hipstar Flex, this is basically the setup of the Hipstar Flex. Carabiner, prusik with an eye, pulley, and I just made this myself out of stuff I had lying around. You can do the same. There's nothing fancy about it. It's nice to have the spliced eyes because they pull out of unions a little bit easier than the fat knots. So take that for what it's worth. And I think the Hipstar Flex is around 240 bucks. Everything here, you might save 50 bucks building it yourself, and maybe even a little bit more if you go with cheaper components, but it's not a huge price difference buying the Hipstar Flex or building your own that is similar. But some of the advantages of this, it's really simple. It's got you can tie the knot. If I nick it, I can cut it off. I can go longer. I can use a whole bunch of rope if I want. And the nice thing about that is this can actually serve as a second double rope system. If I've got 30, 40 feet of rope behind me, all daisy chained up at my harness, I can throw it around a branch and I can have my primary tie off one direction, I can have my lanyard off another direction and really have a long way to go and still be double tied. So it gives quite a bit of, there's some utility to that. It gives you lots of options. It's also really easy to manipulate, to flick around branches, to lob up and over something above me. That's primarily why I use rope lanyards, is for the ability to just have the ease of use within the actual tree. Now, personally, I really like having a pulley to help tend the slack. It makes a big difference. In fact, my go-to lanyard, which I'll show you in a minute, is the Petzl Zillon. But another great way to do this is with just a standard prusik with a carabiner. Now I don't have a pulley on this either direction, so if you're going to tend it, it takes two hands. But the nice thing about this prusik as the second tie-in point, if you look down here, you might want to show this. If you look down here, so now when I'm climbing, I can climb with this side, right, and it'll grab. And if I'm connected here, that's great. I can also take this side, and if I've got a short lanyard or if I've got another carabiner, I can pass it around a tree in another direction, and I'll actually be connected here, and connected here at the same time. So it's got a two-directional prusik here. It goes both ways and holds, but if I want to adjust it, I can still adjust it. It just takes two hands. So that is the downside versus the pulley, where I can have tension here, I can release it with one hand, and I can tend it with one hand. So pulleys are nice, they're smooth, they're great. Having a two-directional prusik on your lanyard gives you some good options too for passing around branches or having multiple tie-in points. So the downside of a rope lanyard like this is obviously it's not cut resistant at all. Even a silky or a handsaw can go right through it in one swipe. I've seen it done, it's very easy to do. Chainsaw, same thing, goes through like butter. One of the ways I remedy this is and I personally recommend that anyone with a rope lanyard do this, so I actually use Tri-Tech. I think Sterling Tri-Tech is the best lanyard rope available. It's oversized, it's over strength, so it's much stronger than a standard rope for the same diameter. It's made of abrasion resistant materials and heat resistant materials, so if, like on occasion, a rigging line doesn't land where it's supposed to and it runs across your lanyard, this will hold up better to that heat and that friction than a standard rope. It's also a little bit cut resistant. It's not as cut resistant as a wire core. Don't count on it. But if you nick it just slightly with your handsaw, it tends to do things like this rather than cut all the way through it. So it also has incredible longevity. Like, it holds up really well over time with very little reduction in overall strength. And then of course, the minimum breaking strength is so high on this 11mm Tri-Tech that even over time, as that minimum breaking strength degrades, you can still have a very high buffer of safety built in. So this is my personal lanyard. This is actually my backup, but so I've got Sterling Tri-Tech here. I've got it spliced at this end. I've got the prusik for my different work positioning harnesses nicely attached. It stays out of the way. I can ignore it 90% of the time, but when I want to use it, it's there. I actually use an ISC snap on my primary one, but any old carabiner will do. And the Petzl Zillon I use as my adjuster. I absolutely love the Zillon. It's so smooth. I'm in a lot of really pitchy, sappy trees. And the Petzl Zillon is not phased by pitch or sap. It adjusts like a dream. It takes no effort. The downside of it is that it does require regular inspection. It's not obvious when it starts to go bad, but you have to look for the tiny cracks that could potentially form. And then it's not going to be strong to side loading at all. So that's something you got to just be aware of. I don't often side load to this because it's so close to my body and that's an awkward position to do it. So I haven't had any issues. This is the second one I've bought. Now it comes with Petzl Zillon here is about 250 bucks. And it comes with a slightly different rope. It's not a cut resistant rope, but it works beautifully. I mean, you can use it until it wears out and replace it, which is kind of what I did. Or you can cut it out right away, throw some Tri-Tech in there. So it doesn't come with any carabiners, but it's got the adjuster on it, 250 bucks. That's a little bit more expensive than the Hipstar Flex, but really similar functionality. The main difference between the Hipstar and this lanyard is going to be using a rope prusik for adjusting versus using a mechanical. And for me, when I'm in pitchy trees all the time, I just can't do without the mechanical. I get so annoyed at rope prusiks because of how inconsistent they function once there's sap involved. So this is my go-to. All right, a couple other little lanyards here. This is the ART positioner. I've used this, I like it. It's a great device. It's super compact, out of the way, very simple. Basically, it attaches like any of these other lanyards. Pull here, it holds. If you hold this handle, it releases. Now, the pros of this device, it's simple, it's fairly universal, it goes on a lot of ropes. The downside, and it's smooth, and it hasn't been affected by sap. It functions beautifully, really, as a device. The reason I don't use it and the reason I prefer the Zillon is the gradual release of the Zillon. This is kind of clunky, and I've got another video where I compare those two devices head to head in the tree, and if you want more info, check that out. It breaks it down, but it is a great device, and I will use this occasionally, like for climbing competitions, things like that, where I need the speed and I want it out of the way and I don't want any trouble. Works great. That would be another positioning lanyard. And the last one I want to show you, and you'll have to forgive me here in that I don't have, I lost one of the little pieces on this hitchhiker. But this is a little known device. It's actually a climb device called the Hitchhiker HH2. And there's not many of them around. If you can find one, snap it up, because it's really a fascinating device. It uses this fairly simple mechanism that actually allows this to be either a lanyard or a climb system on its own, and you can climb single or double rope on this without any change in the system. So it normally has a little pin right here where you tie your prusik loop to on both sides, but I just stuck a steel carabiner in there because it'll function similarly. Obviously, this isn't exactly how it's supposed to go, so don't yell at me too much there. But the idea is this: if I have this on my lanyard, or as my lanyard, I can adjust, I can pull on the back just like you normally would. It's a little bit stiff, and it grabs here, but I could release it under tension just like any of the other prusik or pulley options. Pull here, release, and it'll function as a, any old lanyard. But the other cool thing is I can actually mount it around a branch, throw a little munter hitch or something along those lines on this system, right? So if my neck is the branch, I am now set up on what would be a single rope system. If I move this over to my harness, this is actually still a rated climb system. I can climb on this comfortably. I can belay off of this just like I would a single rope system, and I'm safe. It's designed for this use. So I can take my 10-foot lanyard, wrap it around a branch, and I can get 9 feet away from that branch and that anchor point comfortably and securely using this device. So it actually allows me to keep a much smaller lanyard, so it's less hassle, less hanging around, less to get caught up in the tree, and still have quite a bit of distance and lots of options for my positioning. So that hitchhiker is a little bit of a pricey piece for a lanyard because it's a couple $100 plus just for that one device, not counting any of the other hardware. But once you're done, you actually have a full climb system in addition to a nice lanyard. So that's another good option that not too many people know about, but it's a good one if you can find it. Again, I think they're out of production right now. There's still a few of them around. I got lucky and found one about a year ago. I don't use it that much because I like my short lanyard with the Zillon. So if you want the Strider tree recommendation, Tri-Tech for your rope, Zillon for all of your pruning needs, and for your big removals, you can't do better than that steel core as far as safety. So those are the takeaways. That's my quick primer on lanyards and adjusters. If you got any other questions, be sure to leave them below in the comments. And thank you for joining me this week, Stride Tree Gear. Catch you next time.